Well, good morning, countryside. I'm glad you've joined me this morning. Hopefully, you have a great Friday planned for you. We are going to be in Proverbs chapter 5, and so I'm going to jump right into that. I don't have any announcements this morning except for if you want to join us for a live service, fill out the registration form, and we'd love to see you on Sunday morning at 10. If not, don't forget, if just joining in person is not possible, make sure that you join us online. All right, this is what we've got for this morning. Proverbs 5, chapter 5, starting in verse 1. My son, be attentive to my wisdom. Incline your ear to my understanding, that you may keep discretion and your lips may guard knowledge. For the lips of a forbidden woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil, but in the end she is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death, her steps follow the path to Sheol. She does not ponder the path of life, her ways wander, and she does not know it. And now, O sons, listen to me, and do not depart from the words of my mouth. Keep your way far from her, and do not go near the door of her house, lest you give your honor to others, and your years to the merciless. Lest strangers take their fill of your strength, and your labors go to the house of a foreigner. And at the end of your life you groan, when your flesh and body are consumed, and you say, how I hated discipline, and my heart despised reproof. I did not listen to the voice of my teachers, or incline my ear to my instructors. I am at the brink of utter ruin in the assembled congregation. Drink water from your own cistern, flowing water from your own well. Should your springs be scattered abroad, streams of water in the streets? Let them be for yourself alone, and not for strangers with you. Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice in the wife of your youth. A lovely deer, a graceful doe, let her breast fill you at all times with delight. Be intoxicated always in her love. Why should you be intoxicated, my son, with a forbidden woman, and embrace the bosom of an adulteress? For man's ways are before the eyes of the Lord, and he ponders all his paths. The iniquities of the wicked ensnare him, and he is held fast in the cords of his sin. He dies for lack of discipline, and because of his great folly, he is led astray. So this this chapter in Proverbs deals with one subject. It deals with the subject of adultery, and it makes very clear that adultery is a fool's errand. In fact, adultery leads to ruin. Adultery ruins marriages, it damages children, it destroys a spouse, and it breaks extended families apart. Adultery is one of those sins that, we think, oh, that's bad. But in our culture, it is becoming almost accepted and commonplace. Matthew Henry says this about this situation. Solomon cautions all young men, as his children, to abstain from fleshly lusts. Some, by the adulterous woman, here understand idolatry, false doctrine, which tends to lead astray men's minds and manners. But the direct view is to warn against seventh commandment sins. Matthew Henry is telling us that adultery is more than just adultery. It is idolatry. It is taking the image of what God has created and marring it, and it is worshiping things other than God. And so adultery leads us into all sorts of troubles and sins. And notice that Henry here says that adultery leads men's minds astray. We need to, excuse me, we need to understand that all sin begins in the mind. The devil likes to whisper in our ears that looking but not touching is okay. But the Bible tells us that if we allow ourselves to entertain sin in the mind, it will eventually lead to acting on those thoughts. And that is basically what Solomon is telling his sons. He's saying, don't even go near it. Don't even touch this topic. It is fire. It will burn you. And it will cause death and destruction all around you. And so we have to be very careful. We are not to allow our thoughts to rule over us. Every sin, especially these sins, begin in the mind. So as we start entertaining these things, it actually leads to destruction. And the one great caution that we find is that we must control our thoughts. F.B. Meyer actually says the same thing. He says, the one great caution that we must all observe is the control of our thoughts. The soul must never lie open to the tide of suggestive thoughts that break along its beach. As of old, the watchman kept the gate of the medieval city. So soon as darkness fell, so must the purity of God keep watch and ward an eye gate, ear gate, and touch gate, lest some emissary of evil gain entrance and betray the citadel. Let the Christian be the custodian of thy soul, whether thou be a man or woman, old or young, and let him impart to thee his own divine and human purity. So we have to be careful. Often and classically, adultery was thought of as a man's sin, and more it is becoming equitable. Men and women run towards the other, and the devil loves to play on men's eyes, and he loves to play on women's hearts. It was often said that a man will give love for sex, and a woman will give sex for love. And that is no more true than it is back then as it is today. The devil likes to play on us. He knows our weaknesses, and he studies them, and he goes after Christians who are drawn into these things. And so we have to be careful. And there is so many avenues of adultery, especially in our society, with the free access to the internet and being able to see those things. See, adultery isn't just an act of sex. It starts in the mind. It is what we look at. It is what we dwell on. It is it is allowing our hearts and our minds to be drawn into fantasy, and and all too often that leads to Christians falling into sin. And so we need to be people who guard our hearts and minds. We need to be people who control the input. And here's the great thing. We also serve a God who, if we spend our time loving and chasing after him, gives us the help of his Spirit to avoid these things. Actually, Philippians 4:7 says, "And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Listen, the answer to this, it's not just a single-handed what I do answer. It is a two-handed what God is doing in me and what I am doing and what I am steering away from answer. If we love Christ, if we understand what he has done, if we chase after him, then he will allow us the grace of guarding our hearts against these influences, against these things. And that does include what we control, what we watch, where we go, and who we spend time with. And so that's the wisdom in what Solomon is talking about. He understands that, the thought allowed to grow into an action is death. And so let's be people who put on our spiritual running shoes and we run towards Christ and away from sin. So that's, I know it's a little shorter this morning, but it was a pretty pointed topic in our passage. And so hopefully that'll help you understand this a little bit better, Proverbs 5. And hopefully you're having a great day. Hopefully you've got some good plans for the weekend. Love you. Praying for you. We'll see you again on Monday. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.